Thank you everyone for being here. I'm Dr. Ann McPherson, Chair of the History Department, and I want to welcome our alumni speakers tonight. So we have Carrie Gadd from Brockport High School, Nick Lind from BOCES 1, Jason Ledoux from the Greece District, and Allie Dentinger, and you're with
Northridge Church.
Northridge Church Outreach, right? Formerly with the BOCES and Victor District, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so I'm not going to talk too much. They're here to talk with the students who've come and to give advice about middle and high school social studies teaching careers. So thank you all for coming. And I just wanted to say, if you can just hold that near me. We have for each of you afterwards an alumni t-shirt.
Nice.
And a book. So as historians, you can't, walk away without a book. Thank you all.
So I guess I'm going first. So, hello, I work at Brockport High School. I'm a graduate of my undergrad here in 2003, and then 2005 for my graduate work from here. Then I was very blessed that I was able to go right into the student teaching position that I had. The teacher actually moved to Virginia that summer, so I was called back to go, kind of slide right into her position, which was nice. My interview consisted of meeting with one of the assistant principals and the district HR person, and basically told me when I would start, what I would be teaching, and we just kind of went from there. So I was very blessed for that. Before I did my first portion of my student teaching at Freddie Thomas Middle School and what was, oh my gosh, it just left me, Marshall High School. And they had a night program there. I actually was able to do my student teaching and get paid for doing it by teaching in the night program there as well. So all throughout that initial time, I was just very blessed, and the opportunities came right to me. I know that is not everybody's story. So, but right now I teach teachers technology. So last year I taught half-time classes, and then I was also the technology integration coach. So I have positioned myself within my department. I wrote a proposal a couple years ago, actually 4 years ago now, to make my classroom one-to-one in terms of technology. So it was approved by the district. The district then gave my classroom student devices that stayed in there, and I piloted all kinds of new technologies for them. My students were my guinea pigs. Some of them liked it, some of them didn't, but we all kind of got through it. The devices that they gave me were horrific, actually, in terms of the speed and everything. And the next year I complained, and then the next year they gave me brand new devices, which made it much easier. But that allowed me then to float right into this position as technology integration coach for the building. So right now I see a lot of different classrooms all over the school. So the model that we that I created is it's called the Book Me model. So teachers go into my calendar and book half-hour slots of time for me to sit with them and teach them whatever technology that they would like to use, or to integrate the standards into their integrate the technology into the standards in their lesson plans. So it's kind of cool, and what it allows me is to see all different disciplines and all different teaching styles. I require that if we create a lesson together, that I'm invited back in to see the lesson in progress, and that helps me learn, it helps them learn, and it also helps integrate the technology, because one of the biggest fallacies that I think that we have right now is that teenagers know what they're doing when it comes to technology. They don't. They know what they're doing when it comes to social media, but they do not know what they're doing when it comes to technology. So I call them digital socializers, not digital learners. So being there for support, as a support for them is also helpful. So in terms of advice that I have, the biggest thing is, as you're looking for jobs, make sure that you're in a district or that you're applying to districts that you want to work in. Districts, the demographics of different districts are very different. So make sure that you do the research first. I know everybody wants, to get that first job, and, it's hard. I think in most cases it's hard to get that first position because, a lot of times when you're looking at job descriptions, experience, they're asking for experience, so I realize that it's hard, but make sure that the students that you'll be teaching, that you'll be able to connect to. And then make that your focus. Because I find that when I go to work every day, it's like a cliche, it's not going to work if you enjoy, it's not work if you enjoy what you're doing. And it's very true. And the students will see that, and your administrators will see that. So make sure that you're choosing a career path or choosing the school that you can find, that you can have passion for. The other thing is that when you're like looking for a grad school, the same thing. A lot of times, just being right here. I mean, I think that I got a world-class education, and I've never really left Rockport. So I went to school, I went to elementary school, secondary, my undergrad and my graduate. And I think that I got a world-class education. So, and then in terms, I know I'm kind of all over the place, so I apologize, but there's so many things coming to my head. In terms of the interview process, when I work with teachers, the teachers who have connections with their students, and this ties into the kind of district that you're applying to, the teachers that have connections with their students teach better. And it has nothing to do with pedagogy. It has nothing to do with knowing content. It has everything to do with connecting to those individuals, to the humans that you have in front of you. So if you have that connection naturally, and the kids will say it to me as well, they learn better from teachers that they like. So find commonalities, find similarities that you can talk to make those connections. And in terms of the interview process, I have 3 pieces of advice for you, and these come straight from my district level administrators. I had a meeting with them today, so I told them what I was doing, and they said, I said, tell me 3 things. We had 5 minutes left. I said, tell me 3 things that you want them to know. So the first one is honesty. If you don't know something, just say you don't know. Because they appreciate the honesty, and that also shows them that you then have the willingness to learn it. If you're willing to say, you know what, I've never thought about that, or I've never experienced that before, but I'm willing to learn it, it shows them that you have that growth mindset, which is kind of a buzzword these days. The second thing is your overall appearance, which seems to be something that is, you don't need to say, but, dress professional, overdress even. Overdress and under makeup, they said, if you're a girl. So I thought that was interesting advice. And then the third is diversify your experiences. Many candidates come in and they only have their student teaching experiences, so when they ask for examples, and that was the other thing, is give examples that you have had in the classroom. They only have that student teaching experience to draw on, so put yourself in other situations that you can then draw on a diverse a diverse, your diverse experiences, so that you're not only going back, like the only time that you taught kids was during your student teaching experience. You can then pull on other volunteer experiences or other settings that you interacted with students. So that's what I got.
Thank you so much. Carrie touched on a ton of really good ideas. A few of them I've already gained. So I actually I had one of my student teaching observations with Carrie back in the day. So I was super fortunate to have a good mentor in that way. So I'm Nicolas, I teach at BOCES 1. What's my story here? I graduated from Rockport in 2013. I think looking back, one of the better things that I did when I was here was try to involve myself in the campus and in the community, different clubs and activities, and tried to be active in that way. And also a big thing that I've looked back on and said that I was, I'm glad I did was double majored or tried to get as many certifications, as many academic diverse experiences as I could, because I think it really does, it stands out in an interview, but I think it shows in the day-to-day job too, when you're more well-versed. As far as like certifications go, I mean, if I could tell you one thing, like get as many of those as you can while you're here, because when the district administrator, when the building administrator is hiring, they need someone legally that has this certification or that certification. So the more you have, the more opportunities you're going to have. So I graduated from here, was able to jump right into a master's program down the road at the U of R. And I think I had a different experience from Carrie in that I felt like I did school well. Like I felt like I paid attention. I got the grades you're supposed to get. Like I felt like I did the right thing, and I was kind of coming out of school with like a fresh master's degree, and I thought I was going to be like really desired. Zero interviews, zero phone calls. I applied all over Kingdom Come, and I started with the districts that I really agreed with philosophically. And I felt like their mission and their vision really aligned with what I wanted to do. But you only wait by the phone for so long until you apply everywhere. And I got no calls at all. So all through summer, I'm kind of sweating it out. And the Sunday night before, the Saturday night before school started, I get a phone call at like 9 o'clock at night. And it's some HR person saying, hey, we saw you applied last minute, we need somebody, can you come in tomorrow morning, like Sunday morning at like 8 o'clock, like 12 hours later or something, for this position. I'm like, yeah, sure, great, that's awesome, I'll be there first thing. And I show up and they say, oh, we see that you applied for a couple of teacher positions, but we want to hire for a paraprofessional position. We were wondering if you'd be interested. So this is like a classroom aide position. This is kind of down and dirty work with students, often students with disabilities, almost always I'd say actually students with disabilities, and it's sort of boot camp, and it was not the job that I wanted, and the pay for these jobs, depending on the district, is not good. It's above minimum wage, but just barely. But I took it, and wasn't happy with that decision, and was still job hunting, as I'm sure you guys would do in that situation as well. But then my story does kind of turn, and it got very lucky, like Carrie's, in that a couple weeks into the position, someone in my certification area was going out on a long-term medical leave. So I go to the principal and I'm begging this guy, hey, I know I'm brand new, you don't know me and I don't know you, but do you have anyone lined up for this spot? Like, will you give me a shot? And he did. That person ended up retiring, and I was able to kind of slide into that position. I hope your story is easier than that. I hope that doesn't happen to you. But know that it might. Like, I feel like we should tell you that. Getting these jobs is not an exact science. You can do all these different things to put yourself ahead and to do the right thing and to have the good resume and the good experiences, and you should do all those things. It might come down to luck, and you should know that going in. So since then, I spent a little bit of time at BOCES 2, which is on the west side of Monroe County. It's based in Fairport, but there's kind of classrooms all over. And then for the past 3 years, I've been at BOCES 1 in a similar setting, but more serving the folks on the east side of Monroe County. So I work in a 6-1-1 classroom, so 6 students, 1 paraprofessional, and 1 teacher. And it's been a blast. I've worked with students with all sorts of different types of disabilities. Currently, I work with kids that are very academically talented, but are extremely anxious, extremely depressed often self-harming kiddos, kids that if you get them in the classroom and you're helping them out, they're going to do great. A lot of times they can't get out of bed in the morning, and that's the struggle. And, so if I could give you a piece of advice, I guess it would be to, in your first role, get to know your social workers, get to know your support team at the school, whether that's counselors or maybe a dean or maybe a coach of some kind or maybe a case manager. Every school has different titles for those things, but get to know those people, because some of the hardest kids in your class are gonna need those people to make it in the morning. I'm a big guy with digital tech and getting kids to learn outside of the classroom as well, but for a lot of those kids, if you don't get them in the building, it's game over. We can use a lot of different technology to reach them, but they gotta be in the building too. So I guess we'll probably circle back around. I have some other kind of nuggets of advice, I guess, but my first couple things would be get all the certifications and all the experiences that you can here. Get as many different diverse experiences that you'll bring to the table. But know that this game is a little bit of a circus, that it might not be easy getting a job, and you should know that from. Okay? I got super lucky. So.
I'd like to thank you for this invitation, because this is very important information that we can send out to you that will definitely help as you go out and meet with these school districts. I also want to thank you. What a beautiful campus. When I graduated in 2006, the campus did not look like this. So every time I come back, I'm always, wow, new buildings. I'm just taken back by it. And good news as well, I teach in Greece. And as I look at Greece, the social studies department, which is a huge department, large district, many, many, many of our teachers are SUNY Brockport graduates, either their bachelor or master's. So you're in very good company with Monroe County and really all of New York, because Brockport is known for the history department. So that is very positive. I mentioned in 2006 I graduated. This leads me into, I'm a firm believer that your best chance, potentially, of getting a job deals with your field experience and your student teaching. Those are going to create networks that are going to lead to possibly, when a job opens up, hey, I remember this person. He or she was fantastic. Do you still have his or her number? So take it very seriously, your field experience and your student teaching. Be the person that they cannot forget. Because when those jobs come up, you definitely will be on that list of people to contact. Still, go in with your best foot forward in terms of your interview skills, being prepared, having all of that in front of you, but just take that so serious that, wow, this can really lead to better things, because that's what happened with myself. I student taught at Wayne Central and at Holly. Wayne Central offered me a job as soon as I graduated as a long-term sub. And I did that long-term sub that year. I accepted another long-term sub. And just like everyone here is discussing, 3 days before school starts, Greece calls me. We want you for an interview. We want you to come in. So I did the interview. It was quick. Next thing I know, on my answering machine before I get home, can you start like in 3 days? So I had to go back to Wayne and tell the principal, hey, I can't accept this. But they were very, very happy at what happened. So it's not a linear, finding a job is not something very linear. It might be feast or famine. You might go a long period of time without any interviews, and then all of a sudden, within a week, you're getting, that phone is ringing off the hook. I did, after 2006, I decided to go for literacy to get another certification. The only reason why I did not go to Brockport for that is they didn't offer it. So I went to SUNY Geneseo for But like I mentioned before, at Rockport, great reputation. And ironically, I was hired in the alternative education section of Greece. I've been there 12 years. So students in my class are students who cannot be in a traditional classroom, either behavioral, social emotional, or downright what the school deems dangerous. So that really affects how I look through my lens on how I teach. And that brings me into this idea that if you can teach with this idea and a lens of many of these students that you're going to come in contact with are dealing with trauma. And trauma covers many different variations, from behaviors, one-parent households, abuse, sexual trauma. And one that we've been really talking about in Greece a lot lately is academic trauma. Many students that you might see in high school, even middle school, have never had a positive experience in school academically. They've always known failure. And that really affects how they view you, the classroom, their friends, administrators, the bus ride, everything. So this alternative ed, I think, really needs to spill over into all areas of gen ed, that we all need to look at trauma with our students bringing to the table. Because that affects how I interact with a student, how I redirect a student. Have that empathy, because that's something hugely important in building relationships. So I'm sure we'll come back around and deal with that. But certainly I would just say the trauma part, and have that lens, and just realize people coming in, students coming into your room, are dealing with really, really, really substantial issues that you have to be able to deal with as a professional and as an adult. So there are some responsibilities associated with that. But that's enough for me. I'll pass this along.
Hey guys, how you doing? Good. So my name is Allie Dottinger. I am not currently teaching. I'll just preface it with that. I'll kind of get into what happened. So I actually started at MCC. I went there for 2 years, and I was set up out of high school for a 2+2 with Geneseo. At MCC, your sophomore year, you do a field placement. So I was able to be in the field. I was in 1511 middle school, co-teaching social studies and English, and then on opposite days it was self-contained. So I had from a really young age in my education some experience with special ed, and I quickly realized that I liked social studies special ed. I liked kind of the twist that came with that, and I had to go out of the 2+2 with Geneseo, who didn't have the option to dual in special ed, and I transferred to Brockport, and I was really nervous that I wasn't going to get into the ed program, and I was just but I was really excited when I did. So I finished my undergrad here in 2013 with a degree in history and a special ed certification and a social studies certification. And I actually student taught in the 611 that Nick currently works in. And I loved every second of it, so much so that like 8 weeks in, they were struggling to find me a second placement. And I genuinely was like, can I just stay here? Can I do all 15 weeks of teaching here? I had done the previous field placement there, so I got to spend an entire year in the 611 of Memoroboses, and it was great. I taught social studies, and I was like, this is just wonderful. I could do this the rest of my life. So into that summer, I graduated, and they were like, do you want to be a para? So I also was a para. It was great. It was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot. I worked with this kid with more energy than I've ever seen before. I kid you not, if I could bottle it, I'd be rich. And I just chased him around the halls. But I also learned a lot about kind of seeing all the different contents, kind of following him around. So that fall, I didn't have a job, and they were like, well, why don't you come as a para? So I did that for about a week, and then a student entered into the program that needed a one-to-one associate teacher. So I took an associate teacher job. And then suddenly there was a social studies job, so then suddenly I was teaching social studies. So in 1 year I went from being a one-to-one aide to a one-to-one associate teacher to a social studies teacher, and it was great. I was like, I could do this the rest of my life, but I got to the end of that year, and there wasn't a permanent job. I had tried applying across the street into the program known as Creekside, which was really kids with severe developmental disabilities, and I was excited for that. I had had some experience with that. But I ended up number 2. They picked someone internally. As you kind of seen, it's very common in BOCES to move up the ranks. So I just kind of sent out applications, and I got called from Victor. I got a call like a week before school started, is sort of the trend. Don't be surprised if that happens to you as well. The teacher I was replacing had resigned halfway through the school year to take a job in a different, or halfway through the summer to take a job in a different district. So I interviewed the day after new teacher orientation ended. Talk about stressful. So I got there like Thursday, like 4 o'clock in the afternoon was the last interview of the day. And I think they were just glad that I had heard of like alternative assessment in CDAWS. I went for, so it was a special ed position because I was dual certified and I had really great special ed experiences. I think one of the biggest things, like looking back, like I knew I wanted to teach social studies and I knew I liked special ed. So I think one of the mistakes I made early on was focusing overly on special ed because I liked it and I was good at it, but like social studies was my passion. And I thought I was even, I don't know if I think I was better at it. So I got hired as a special ed teacher in Victor. I co-taught English 9, which worked out fairly well, just coming from a social studies background, but then I also taught a 15-1-1, which just had a huge diverse needs, kids on the spectrum, kids with just crazy ADHD, kids with emotional disabilities, and it was a crazy year. It was really, really hard. And then my second year teaching, I had multiple kids that started in the co-taught classes who needed to be in the self-contained 15-1-1, and I just spent my entire year chasing them around the building. I was so tired all the time. All I would do every day is drink a pot of coffee because that's what I needed to get through the day. Don't do that. It's one of the best advices. Like, it is okay to stop and eat lunch for 10 minutes, 20 minutes is even okay. But I didn't believe that at the time because if I stopped and ate my lunch, so-and-so was gonna climb under the table in the cafeteria and start mooing. Like, that really did happen to me. So it was different than what I went to school for, and I was really good at it. I was, you know, they were like, oh, there she comes again, she's gonna get so-and-so who's under the table, and they're gonna be so impressed with my skills, and it was really hard because I was willing to do it, and I was good at it, but I didn't necessarily love every second of it. So that third year teaching, I transitioned straight into 15-1-1, and I had just so many adults in my room. I had 14 kids, and you know, aides are, how many aides do you have in your room?
I mean, one right now.
One right now.
In 5 years of teaching, I think I've had 14.
Yeah, so they come and go, they get paid so little, they get really tough kids, and just really tough, you know, sometimes you're managing someone that's like double your age, which can be a little bit challenging. So I got to the end of my third year of teaching, and I started into the fourth year of teaching, and it was going well, and I felt like I was getting in a rhythm, but I also was like, man, I just want to teach social studies. And the year before that, I had helped someone else get a job in my department that was also a Brockport grad, and it was great. We were doing special ed together, and then he transitioned over into social studies, and I was like, I was so jealous. Like, I'd sit in his office, and he'd be like, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that, we're going to talk about this, and I was just, I want to do that so bad. So I was like, would I ever be able to pivot out of special ed? And I think at that point it kind of became apparent that I wouldn't be able to, so that's a piece of advice. If you don't want to teach special ed, like, don't overly specialize in it. And like, yes, that might be where the jobs are, but it might be worth it to hold out if like social studies is your passion. And like, I was pretty involved outside of teaching with a lot of projects involving social studies. I have been involved in some social justice projects, some activism, a lot of outreach projects. So at that point, I was teaching full time. It was absolutely sucking the life out of me, and I was involved in these awesome projects outside, and I came on staff part-time at the church I worked for, and I was just given so much freedom to be in the community and to do things, and I, about a year ago, things just like really heated up in the community, and the conversation of like, would the church ever offer me a full-time job occurred. So come this past June of 2018, I resigned my teaching job, and now I work full-time for a church doing outreach, but this is actually current news. I leave for New York City to do an interview in New York City tomorrow to live in a soup kitchen. So it's called voluntary poverty. You don't get paid. You just live there and serve the poor and protest war and get arrested. And my mom and dad don't know yet until it's happening. My mom and dad, they're not watching this. They don't care. They do care, but. So it is okay to transition out of teaching if you know, if it's not where you're at. And I know, like, for me, there are a lot of days where I really miss my kids. I had kids that I was with for 4 years that I graduated, this past June, and occasionally I get text messages from parents like, we really missed you, so-and-so said, asked me to reach out to you and say hi. I'm really close with a lot of the aides still. I get pictures a lot. Sometimes when I'm having a bad day, I'll shoot a text. I'm like, what's so-and-so doing today? Can I get some fun? And they just have a blast. A lot of really, tough needs in my room though. Talk about like finding a district that works for you. How do I say this nicely? I don't know that I was in the best district for me. I had a flood of support when I was at BOCES that a kid could flip a table at me and someone was immediately in the room to help. That didn't exist in the district I was teaching special ed in. It just wasn't, the district wasn't set up to do that. The psychs were used as pseudo-administrators. We were really low administrative-wise. So it just made it tough, and there were a lot of things that just pointed to like, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. Like, I was pulling gray hairs out too, and like, once again, living off of coffee. I think there was a girl with clearly paranoid schizophrenia that probably needed to be in Nick's room, but she was in my room, and I would get an email from like my neighbors, can you make her stop screaming? And I'm like, you think I would if I could? Like, I know she's been going for 2 hours. So like, it's okay if teaching is really, really hard and you make a decision that you don't want to do it, but I also challenge you to don't like make that lightly, because the impact that you can have on these kids, like, I love that you mentioned like the trauma, like you might be the only one rooting for that kid, and there's days where I'm like, man, I can't believe I left. I know I'm the only one that was rooting for that kid, but someone else will fill that role. So, I'm excited, with what I have now on my plate. Do I think I'll ever go back to teaching? Probably not. I don't think you're supposed to teach if you have arrests on your record. You said you'd get arrested with me one day, maybe.
Yeah, one day.
One day. So, yeah.
I want to ask you a question, but I figure I should take this, and then I thought I would turn it over to you guys if you have questions at this point. So could you just say maybe just a couple minutes comments on if you think you could have managed the stress in a way that would have slowed down or prevented the burnout? Because I'm guessing burnout is something that you all have to deal with, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. I probably would have pushed back a little bit. I let administrators say, this is insane, but we know you can handle it. There were a lot of times where I think I could have said, this is too much. I do expect you, so-and-so and so-and-so to pull their weight. I think self-care, it is okay to stop and eat lunch. It is okay to cry. The self-care component is definitely really, really important. I would be up till 2 a.m., differentiating things, and getting up at 5 a.m. to go, and get ready for the day. And just having so much else on my plate, maybe that was one of the areas I fell short, like trying to get myself involved in other projects. But I also knew at the end of the day that's where I wanted to be. Also trusting you're not the only solution for that kid. That kid that's struggling, you are not their savior. You might be a piece of the puzzle that makes them have a successful education, and I think it was especially challenging because I looped with my kids, and I had kids that came in as freshmen that are now seniors that I was with for 3 years, that I gave up a senior year for. Just trusting that everything doesn't have to be perfect. I have a tendency to try and make things over the top, really good, perfect, and it's okay if it's not.
That's what your 390 paper was like.
Oh,
Allie
yeah.
took 390.
It was hard too, and I came in as a transfer student, and I remember literally sitting that first day of the syllabus, first day of the Brockport, and I was like, I think I can do this.
Yeah, I have something else though with the.
Yeah, for sure. And then after this, I'll hand it over to the students, and then we'll come back around to all you guys.
In terms of the burnout, because it is, and all of us probably have felt that, it's okay to shut your door.
It is?
Yeah.
You sure?
Positive. It's okay to shut your door, because you will, there are so many, I describe it as winds. So the wind will blow you one way and it will blow you the next, and, oops, sorry, I hit the thing. So it's okay to just shut your door and close out the wind, because you will have administrators knocking on your door for different committees, different subcommittees, you know, help, asking if they see that you're a person that will do anything that they ask you to do, they will come to you. And there's a fine line there, because you want to make yourself accessible, but there's also time where you know, just, you have to get good at saying no.
And when you're not tenured, you're in this like really unique position of like, they'll just decide not to keep me on.
Right,
So that was definitely an area where I think
right, tenure is when, so in most I think it's statewide, actually it's 3 years, right?
it's 4 years now.
So 4 years. So after 4 years, you're fully vested in your position. So that means it's essentially difficult for them to fire you without any cause, without any great cause. So, and it is difficult when you're a new teacher and you're just trying to learn the ropes, and you probably, you know, have 5 or 6 preps because everything tends to roll downhill. You know, to want to say yes because you want to get that tenure. But if it's going to burn you out, or if you're feeling that way, just close your door and do what matters to you. So, you know, do history, do social studies, you know, make connections with your students. I always found, I still, to this day, even though I work more with adults than students, I like kids better than I like adults. So anytime I need a recharge, you know, my door is wide open, and I'm texting kids, you know, my former basketball players or whatever, come on in, I need a session. So I also do restorative justice at the school, so we do circles, so we call them sessions. So, and it's just a recharge. It's a recharge for me and a recharge for them. So that's my advice there. If you guys have other things.
Thank you. So I'll just hand the microphone down, and if any of you have a question that you want to ask these guys, feel free. You can hand the microphone around among you. And then maybe when we come back, you guys could talk a little bit about how your history, social studies, and education coursework, you feel like you've implemented that as teachers.
All right, my question is,
Can you tell us your name first?
I'm Jack.
Okay.
I'm a senior here, I'll be graduating in May. And I was wondering, would you say experience is the biggest factor in landing a job? And if so, how do you go about attaining that level of experience that's going to get you a job?
Well, I'll have to say, I have to agree with what we spoke about. I'm a firm believer that luck sometimes just falls into place. I think if you try to outwit it, it'll come back and haunt you. Sometimes you have to do what you have to, send out your resumes, get all that taken care of. Again, use the tools you've been given with your field experience and your student teaching. Stay in contact with all of those contacts, you know, and just find out if they're hiring. That is an issue, because really I was hired just for my student teaching. I mean, and I don't know, there's a long-term sub, we know Jason, let's hire him. And then my other one came through, just the phone call at, 4 in the afternoon, hey, tomorrow you have an interview. I didn't really have any connections in Greece, and then I was hired. So I don't know that experience, at least for the first job. Maybe not as much, maybe it's just luck. Maybe your resume is right there, your application comes up. I do think, though, working in alternative educational areas might be a great way to get your foot in the door, because there are jobs that are continually posted. There are jobs that are not really affiliated with schools, but will give you school experience. Villa of Hope, Hillside. I taught 2 summers at Villa of Hope. That really, I already had 10 years in, of teaching. Those 2 summers taught me a lot about myself and how I interacted with students. How to pick my battles. How to know when, whoa, that's not necessary, let things go. How to redirect, not front on, but from the side. So there are ways to get that experience that might not be in full public schools.
I'd say a couple things. So first, every day is an interview. Every experience you have, every person you're talking to, whether it's classmates here, whether it's professors here, people that you're working with, your field experiences, every time that you're interacting with them is an impression that you have to make for the better. I have an opening in my school coming up that it's not posted on a job board yet, but I'm thinking of somebody who I haven't seen in years, and I'm gonna call this person and say, hey, we have this opening, you should consider this, because I remember their energy, and I remember their commitment, and I remember, I don't know if they're interested at all, but I'm gonna call them and ask. And you wanna put yourself in that position. I would say too, that I think the experiences that Jason was talking about in alternative ed settings or in a special ed setting is definitely gonna set you apart. You'll be in a position, let's say you're working at a BOCES, or let's say you're working at like Villa Hope or the Hillside program or some other community program where you're working with kids that are very needy, very tough in lots of different ways. But you're putting yourself in a position where you can go to any district and you can say, hey, that kid in your village that, this family, they have this and that going on, that's the kid I work with. That's the kid I got. And you can go to them and say, the hardest kids that you outsource to some other place, those are the kids I teach, right? I take your hardest kids, that's my specialty, right? That's a good position to be in. You can go anywhere with that. So how do you put yourself in that position? I think an opportunity you should consider is a lot of schools in the area, as part of their teacher contract or as part of their labor contract, have tuition reimbursement. And a lot of schools are very hungry for that paraprofessional role. There's high turnover in that role. It's not great pay, but it's better than nothing, and it gets you that experience, potentially when you're in grad school, potentially when you're finishing up coursework here, where you can take courses in the evenings or in the afternoons or on Saturdays or whatever, and your school will pay for them. They will give you tuition reimbursement for that. And if I had a do-over, that's something that I would consider doing, just for the sake of having fewer student loans and having better opportunities in that way. But there are opportunities to get your foot in the door where you can make that impression, you can gain some hours in a school setting. Not necessarily as a teacher, but you're in a good position to get into that opening when it comes up. Probably before it even hits a job board, your principal's just gonna ask you, hey, I know you're certified, I know you've been putting in good work here, you're getting tuition reimbursement through us, would you be interested in X, Y, or Z opportunity?
And to go along with that, subbing. Subbing. I subbed for 2 years before I graduated, so I did, and the criteria for subbing is just a high school diploma. You don't actually have to be certified at all. So after my first year of college here, I applied at Brockport for a sub position, and I subbed the remaining 3 years of my undergrad. So I took my classes on Tuesday, Thursdays, and I subbed on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I went back, I came as an adult student, I was 29 and had 3 children. So and I was doing hair as well. So I had to still support myself and my children. So that was the way that I did it. I think you get $95 a day to sub, and you got the experience. And I love every interaction is an interview. And we have sub positions at Brockport that don't fill every day. So there's a huge need for them. And the more districts you sub in, the more opportunities that you have to get your foot in the door. And you're getting paid on top of it. It's a win-win.
Oh, I have a thought too.
Go ahead.
So just another thought, when I interviewed for my special ed job, I went on the website ahead of time and looked up some of the information, just like read through some of their policies. So when they were asking my opinions on things, I was able to speak to their policy. I know they asked about assistive tech, and I had read a whole flyer on assistive tech. The fact that I knew what a transition program was and had some experience in one, that was a big deal. So knowing what the district is already doing is super helpful. The other advice I have when you're interviewing, as you finish up answering a question, ask a question to them. So that you're gaining more information about what they're looking for by their responses. Because sometimes it's like they ask, you respond, they ask, you respond. Like flip that interview into a conversation Because then they're seeing you as a colleague versus just a person that they're being interviewed by.
That's a really great practical tip. I just recently learned about the Teaching Immersion Fellowship Program. Do you guys, if you're in certification, you've heard about that? So this is to address the sub shortage. And so it's guaranteed, it's some guaranteed days or hours, and I think it's $100 a day. And you don't have to be in a certification program, but, so how many of you guys are already in social studies certification? Jamie, just you? Okay. All right, so if you're not, this is open to you as well, because like Carrie said, you don't have to have a college degree already.
Right.
Okay, so I'm gonna hand the mic to you. If you don't have any questions or comments, hand it on.
Hi, my name is Iranzi, and my question is, so since you guys are all social studies, when you were here, did you know if you want to teach global history or American history? And once you got a teaching position, did you have an option of choosing what you want to teach? Because I feel like it's difficult to memorize all the history,
Can I answer that one for you? Thank you. So where I work, I'm in a small alternative school called the Phoenix Academy, which is Greece Central. I am the social studies department. So I teach Global 9, Global 10, US, CIA, which is government economics together, every day. So I am it. The expectation is, in other schools, that you have the ability to teach any or all of those. So basically, if you're coming in, most likely, you're going to be teaching kind of quote, quote, what's left. Okay? Some schools, certain teachers love the global and do not like the US. But basically, when you start off, you're going to be taking whatever is available. And you might have many different preps, because those other teachers might have kind of worked it out so they don't have as many. So you might have 3 preps, you might have more. So definitely be prepared for every aspect of history, social studies, economics, government. You need to really, really, really use that history degree for that, because the expectation is you might have to teach it. I love that all. I never have a problem. If they want me to teach global, I'm there. I want to teach economics, I'm there. Other teachers really kind of go into the global teacher or the US teachers, especially in the larger schools. They have like departments. Smaller schools, you kind of have one situation on it, where you have to be kind of be able to take on everything that's thrown at you.
So my first 4 years of teaching, I taught, I started with Global 9. The next year they came to me and said, we need you to teach Global 10. The next year they came to me and said, we need you to teach US history. And the next year they came to me and said, we need you to teach government. So in the first 4 years, I taught 4 different subjects. And there were several students that I ended up seeing, like you, freshmen all the way to senior. By the time I had them as seniors, I said, if you want to get out of here, you can go to the counseling office and get changed. Thankfully, many stayed. I did have 2 that left. They were like, we've had enough of you. I'm like, okay, good. And I wanted them to get different experiences because, one teaching style, especially if you're going on, to college, you need to, experience different teaching styles. So, so it was basically whatever they came to me and told me I was teaching, I taught. And you're right, it is hard to memorize, every curriculum. And sometimes there's gaps, and it depends on, and this kind of goes to your second question, how did my degree prepare me to teach? I hadn't taken a lot of government courses. I took US history courses, but most of my coursework focused on the antebellum period. I was fascinated with the Civil War and Reconstruction, so I took a lot of courses in college that focused on that. So when it got to modern America in my US history courses, I had 1 course under my belt. So I had to do a lot of research. I found myself in in that course and in government, literally 1 page ahead of the textbook, or ahead of the kids in the textbook. So you do what you have to do in order to prepare. You know, districts now are starting to align curriculums. So if you go to your, they were called different things at different places, but instructional coaches or your instructional supervisors, department chairs, they usually have documents that have what the state standards are and what the district focuses on in terms of those standards. And then you create your lessons from there. Many districts are going to common formative assessments. So the assessments are written already for you, so you have to align your curriculum, you know, to those assessments. So you start with those and then make your lesson plans from there. But it's a lot of upfront work. You know, I remember my first probably 6 years of teaching, I didn't go to bed before midnight. I was either grading papers or creating lesson plans. You know, and every time I taught a course, I was like, oh, okay, I've got this one down, I can use this next year. And then they would email me over the summer and say, nope, you're teaching a different course. I'm like, I'm gonna be up until midnight again. So you get through it. At that time, I was taking my grad classes. I relied on my professors in grad school for, you know, a lot of resources to, you know, to pull on so that I could make my lessons. So, I don't know, I think that's
Just real briefly, you're gonna get voluntold to do whatever course they have an opening with. And over time, you can hopefully kind of negotiate and convince your colleagues to switch or do something like that. One kind of practical tip might be to try to write an elective course curriculum. So every student that's on a Regents track needs 3 or 3.5 courses or credits of elective credit. And so school's got to offer them. And if you can convince your school to let you write the curriculum for an elective, be it film history, military history, international relations, some sort of elective course, if you write it, they're going to want you to teach it. And then they're going to have to carve out time for it. So just something to think about down there.
I just wanted to quickly say, I'm sure you're aware that the global Regents is heavily in transition right now. Will be a brand new exam in June, with the US exam changing in the next year or two. And basically, these new Regents are going to mirror more of college level thinking. More writing, more being able to prove point of view, being able to prove reliability. So we're transitioning as a state into more college level writing that you're going to have to be able to show students, hey, here's what we need. It's no longer just memorizing and just answering a multiple choice question. Now you're going to have to say why. So just be aware of that you're coming into the profession at a really, really transitional part of our history, where we're transitioning two of the big Regents exams. So just kind of be aware of that. And it's creating a lot of issues, a lot of headaches.
I kept a flash drive, so I can still go back and pull up everything. Every time I would create a document, I saved it on the flash drive. So I had English 9, I had my 15.1.1 math, my 15.1.1 English, my 15.1.1 life skills. I had resource room documents. I also had a kid 3 years that was legally blind that needed everything at 28 size font. So I had to create almost everything because I needed him to be able to have access to the document. So keeping a flash drive is really helpful because you can go back to the previous year. Once you've established a course, it's going to get a lot easier. And just in terms of memorizing all the content, you're never going to know all the content, but that's why there's resources available. And most districts are flipping towards a collaborative standpoint, so you'll share resources with other people that are teaching similar things. And I know I loved my history courses, but they didn't teach me history. They taught me skills. I know how to read, I know how to write, I know how to analyze, I know how to argue. And I know some great history facts, but I took a whole class on piracy. It was great. It was one of my favorite courses I ever took here. But you don't teach about pirating. I occasionally have a good argument with someone about what the definition is. but it did never come up when I was teaching. But what it taught me to do those skills, kind of as you referenced, like the Regents exams are changing, those are the skills that your students need. And obviously it's wrapped around the content. I think you'll be surprised too, like how much of it you're like, oh yeah, we learned this in high school. You'll remember a lot of it. But it's those skill-based things that you are gaining, even if it doesn't feel like it. But that's why you don't have to take, every single class in undergrad, because those skills are what matter, not as much the content. But the content's really good too.
And I will just say, this is also where we have the adolescent social studies track and the history department set up the way it is, right? So that you take a European, you take Asia, Latin America, Middle East, Africa, you take 2 upper level US history classes, so at least you started on these various things. Plus you have to take the econ, geography, political science, and a sort of diversity course, right? Okay, so I'm gonna see if Bobby or Jamie has a question.
You go. I got a couple questions for you. Go ahead. Hello, I'm Bobby.
Hey, Bobby.
So I got a couple questions, so I'm just gonna take the most important to me. So one important one was how different is inner city schools with administrations, administration wise, how different is inner city in a bigger, more not bigger but richer school? And how different is the atmosphere with administrators, with your coworkers, not necessarily students, but coworkers and stuff. How different is it? A different atmosphere? Is it do they treat kids different? Do they have a different expectation from kids, or things like that?
So, I can answer that.
Hang on, Carrie.
Yep.
You want to pass it to them? Thanks.
So, it's Bobby, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I taught, my first student teaching experience was at Freddie Thomas Middle School, and then I also taught at what used to be Marshall. I forget what it's called now. It's since been closed and then
All City.
reopened. Is it All City? Yes. And in terms of the administration, the difference between Freddie Thomas and Marshall and then Brockport, I teach at Brockport now, I found that at that time, and we're talking 2003, so many, many years ago, they had a more contentious relationship with the staff, with the faculty, than at Brockport. Since then, so I have an aunt who is the principal of East High School currently. So I have visited there. Her and I talk frequently. In terms of relationships, things have seemed to improve there, and her goal is to provide the teachers with whatever they need in order to do their job effectively. Whereas at Brockport, we have more of a contentious relationship between teachers and administration right now because of some of the initiatives that are being pushed down from the district level in the state. So, it's funny how that kind of flipped. But what I want to actually tell you, and I hope that I'm not going to offend you, so I'm gonna just throw that out there, okay? And I'm sorry, what is your name again?
Me?
Yes,
Iranzi.
Iranzi. Okay, so I'm gonna tell the two of you, and I truly hope that I'm not going to offend you. We need you in the teaching profession. And we need you specifically because of how you look. Because I also work with the diversity club at the high school, and I am trying to, Brockport is a predominantly white district with predominantly white teachers. However, we have students of color that we do a very poor job of reaching. And you are, in my opinion, most needed in our profession right now to reach our students. So again, I hope I'm not offending you, but I am so very, very happy that you're here today and that you are willing to be a part of our great profession, because our students need you. They really do. So thank you.
To kind of build on that a little bit, I think that any scenario that you're in, any school setting, whether it's urban or rural or suburban or somewhere in between, you're going to have different leadership styles. You're going to have different, the leader is going to have different strengths and weaknesses. You're going to have different strengths and weaknesses in the teaching staff and the paraprofessional staff and the support staff. And it's everybody's job to make sure that the job gets done, right? Like that's going to fall on the leader ultimately, like your principal, your assistant principal, your vice principal, whoever that is. And like as a newer teacher, I tried to always fit into their style well, whatever that was going to be. And so I think like part of that is like playing off whatever your strength is, whatever your background is, whatever your kind of whatever role you play, trying to fit that well. I don't know necessarily that there's a huge difference between styles based on the type of school. Maybe there is. In that way, I kind of don't have as many experiences as some of the other people, so I'll let you guys kind of speak to that.
Some thoughts?
Just do it real quick.
Yeah, no, you're good.
One thing that surprised me, and it still surprises me to this day, is how transient the administration is in many schools. Just when you think you get used to a person, they're gone. It seems like these assistant principals and principal jobs are just, they're always turning over. It's not the same year to year. And I grew up, when I went to high school, pretty much the same principals and assistant principals were there. It's not the case now. And it's gonna, I think, shock you just how the movement between schools and districts, that every year you need to have a scorecard to see who's now the principal at that school. And it's just something that still surprises me, that it is very transient. And that's hard for you as a teacher, because you get used to somebody, you get used to initiatives, you get used to their personalities. But every year you're having to change. So you have students changing, then you have administration changing, and it puts you kind of in a very strange position. So I just want to make sure you kind of maybe get used to that, okay?
I'd say wherever you end up, make sure that you have administrators that are and you're comfortable with the way that they interact with diversity and poverty. I know where I taught, it's Ontario County, so it's got low taxes, but everyone thinks it's a Monroe County school, and it kind of fits and ranks within those schools. But over the last several years, a lot of low-income families, a lot of English language learners, a lot moved into the district, and the district would like almost refuse to acknowledge it. It was like, you know, the tale of two cities, and that was really, really challenging. When I'd be like, I literally had kids that were homeless in my classroom, kids that were living in trailer parks who, you know, had been displaced, that didn't have anywhere to go, and, you know, to get the district to bus in from the city was really, really challenging. But I also had the wealthiest of the wealthy. I realized my very first day teaching, when I had one kid say, my dad sells yachts for a living, and we know Kenny Chesney, do you want to meet him? And another kid I'm helping with his free lunch. So like, I'm like, what did I just get myself into? So if your district doesn't put the social, emotional, and diverse learning, you know, if that doesn't rank with the academics, like I would be weary, because I think the long-term implications of that, I think, are there. And I always say, and I don't know, I'm sure there's differences in opinion, I would much rather have students that are nice and that are growing and flourishing than academically gifted and don't know how to interact with people and don't love their neighbors and care for each other. So,
Thank you, guys. So I see if Jamie, did you have something? Okay, and then when you're done, you can hand back to Bobby, because I think he has a second one.
Hi, I'm Jamie, and my question was, what are some things you wish you were taught in college that you didn't learn about until you became a teacher?
I'll jump on that. For me, the biggest thing was getting myself in a position where, so I mean, kind of picture this, you get your first job, you're fresh out of school, you're probably in your early 20s, right? You walk in and you have staff that you're working with that are maybe in their 50s or 60s, they've been there for 40 years, and they're not getting the job done, right? But you're brand new, you know nothing, right? You know nothing about the organization, you haven't been doing it for a tiny fraction of the time that they've been doing it, right? So how do you work with those people? How do you tell someone who's a veteran that, you've been screwing up for like 35 years, man? What do you like? How do you have that conversation with someone? Or if it's a paraprofessional, how do you feel comfortable with sort of managing that person and being not their boss, but really like their day-to-day in the moment kind of their boss? And that's something that we don't necessarily experience in courses. I don't know how that would be replicated. There's probably a way, but I don't think it really happens in most courses. But it is really valuable to think about, like how can you function on a team with someone who hasn't been in college for 30 or 40 years, doesn't have the freshest research, the freshest background in the best methods and the best pedagogy, and you see them doing things that aren't great for kids. And how do you have a conversation with them to be assertive but respectful, and to be a good teammate but still to look out for kids, to say, we need to change, like we need to do something different. And that's, you get better with practice. The first couple times is pretty awkward, it's pretty weird, you screw it up, but that's, I think, really just practice. I wish we had courses that did that. I don't know how we would, but that's my biggest thing.
I would say trauma-informed education, poverty-informed education. I don't know, back in 2003, if there was, I think if there's more of a focus on it now than when I went to school. But, like everybody else, I really had no idea how much trauma my kids, and I think I'm the only one that's working in a regular ed setting, right? Even in a regular educational setting, how much trauma my kids have had in their lives. Students who've lost parents, students who've lost siblings. Just in our district alone, we've lost 2 former students that had family that still attend the school in a really tragic incident. We've had 4 just this year drug overdoses of former students that have family still in the district. So our community is grieving, I think, but I think that everyone, I shouldn't use an absolute qualifier, but there are several students that I interact with on a daily basis who are grieving and who are living in poverty. I keep a food closet that I stock, and the social worker stocks in my room, because kids don't have access to food at home. They get free lunch, they get free breakfast, but it's not enough for them. And it's very difficult, I know all of us, it's very difficult to focus when you're hungry. So we want, we want to teach these kids social studies, and we want to teach them all these great things, yet they're wondering what they're coming home to, or what they're going to go home to, or they're wondering if their parent is going to have dinner for them. I have a student who takes care of her 3 younger siblings every day because her mother doesn't come home at night. So I kind of just wing it, but I wish that we had courses on how to deal with that.
Yeah, I have to agree 100%. When I graduated, I was so focused on content. Wow, am I going to know enough? What if they ask me a question I don't know? I'm going to look like a fool. I quickly realized that's a small portion of what teaching is, and really if you look at an iceberg, whatever 95% is below the water, your relationship building with the students is what makes a teacher a teacher. And you're going to have to really deal with that, and deal with being a counselor, providing food, being the person that they might be the only positive, you might be the only positive adult in their life. You're going to have to hear things that are going to make you sit down and say, wow. So take that relationship building. That is the most important. The content, that'll come. The other teaching part, that'll come. But if that relationship isn't there, that's never going to happen, because you're dealing with such really, really traumatic issues with students that we're now recognizing are affecting every aspect of their lives. and you're the person that's gonna be, wow, I'm gonna be positive. So that's what I would say, and that's what surprised me, and that's what will make you a great teacher.
Yeah, I think in nature I'm a control freak, if you guys haven't caught on to that at all. I think you probably agree. I think one of the things I wish I had like known going in is like I can't control what goes on outside my classroom, outside my little bubble of influence. But I can control what happens in my classroom. I can control the way I treat a kid. I can control how I advocate for them. Same thing, I can't control if they've been fed that night. I can't control if they don't know where they're sleeping. I can't control how another teacher interacts with them. I can advocate for them as best I can. I can speak good things about them. I can, cheer them up. I can encourage them. Because I think that relationship building is what, at the end of the day, makes you a teacher. I agree very, very much with that. That content is just a piece of it. I taught math. It was really low math. We were oftentimes doing like fractions and coins and stuff. And it didn't matter because we were building a relational economy as we did it. And I know like for me, like I hit a breaking point, a year ago. There were so many things going on. Like I'm working right now on a state level to help solve the housing crisis because I had kids that were homeless. I had kids that didn't know where they were gonna sleep that night. And that to me, it pushed me over the edge, knowing that there were hungry kids in my room and that there was policy that I could push that could change it.
And I'm thinking probably your history courses, particularly US history courses, helped you understand why these kinds of inequalities and problems exist, but it doesn't necessarily give you the tools to solve it on an individual level, right, or a district level. Okay. So Bobby, I think you have another question, and then I thought what we could do is maybe turn off the camera, give folks a chance to get some food, maybe talk one-on-one. So Bobby, this will be the last one.
So, last question is, what advices can you give us to like help creating lessons? Like, cause I know what I heard at least is that high school teachers have like less wiggle room than college teachers. So like, what kind of like advice do you give us, to make it more fun and like trending? Cause like, kids are always into the trends. So like, what advice can you give us to help it be a better class environment?
Want to take that one first? Sure.
Sure.
Well, the tech person would have.
Well, I do have something, but I don't always want to go first, so.
So you're gonna need to learn how to speak meme.
What?
You're gonna need to know how to make memes.
Okay.
That's gonna be important, for sure. Some districts, some places that you'll be at might hand you a lesson. They might tell you what you're gonna teach and how you're gonna do it. Most places will give you some leeway along the lines of as long as you're hitting these standards, as long as you're hitting these sort of objectives that we want you to hit, you can kind of figure out how to do it. And then in other places, it's going to be totally just make sure you don't like burn the building down, just whatever goes. There's pluses and minuses to each of those kind of settings, but I would say as a general rule, if you're busy doing stuff and the kids are sitting around doing, kind of following along, you should maybe rethink it. If you're just doing all the work, if you're up at the front of the room, if you're facilitating a slideshow, if you're if you are necessary, if you have to be there for it to happen, you should maybe rethink it. Right? More and more people strive toward trying to facilitate the lesson. You're going to be there, but the kids are going to be working through something that you designed, something that is aligned to the objectives that you want it to be aligned to and all the standards that it's supposed to be aligned to, but kind of teacher as facilitator is probably a positive model that you want to work toward. Some places are going to really love that and let you kind of jump into that. Other places are going to kind of be a little more prescriptive in how you run your classroom, but I'd say in a perfect scenario, you want to have the kids do the work and you're in the background to help them, not the other way around.
So I've got a lot actually, but I'll keep it just little. I agree wholeheartedly with what Nick said. The number one complaint that I hear from students that come to me is my teacher talks too much. So I actually, I like to think of myself in the classroom as a coach. So I've got sports examples, I always use that. So, you know, like when you're facilitating a practice, you know, like a basketball practice, you come up with the plan, and then who does the work? The players do, right? So if you run your classroom like that, like if you look at your lesson plan as a practice plan, and you're the coach of that classroom, then they're doing the work. There are a lot of cool tools out there, take advantage of them. So, you know, and again, you'll get districts that have pre-packaged lesson plans, but in your own classroom, even with those pre-packaged lesson plans, you still have autonomy. You know,
Shut the door.
You can shut the door. I always called my, so before I was married, I called my room Blocker World. So, and what happened in Blocker World stayed in Blocker World. So, you know, and so you can shut the door and make it fun. There's a gentleman that, he's actually at a charter school, and he's the principal of a charter school right now, but he did a seminar on teaching the hip hop generation, and it, you know, really reach the kids where they're at. You know, you have youth on your side. Me, if I try to do that, they'll laugh me out of the room, so I have to, you know, I have to work within that, but, you know, you have to prepare them for their learning that day. So, you know, you have to think of it like, you know, you're opening up their brains and pouring stuff in. You have to prepare them for that. So whatever you have to do to get them prepared and to reach them, to focus and to be in that blocker world, you know, you have to do that. But you have to find your own personality with that. You have to, you know, you have to still remain true to you. And use the cool tools. I mean, there's a whole bunch of technology stuff that you can use that engages kids. Gaming, you know, even like vocabulary now, it used to be like flashcards. You can do things like Quizlet or Kahoot and make it a game, and the kids really get into it. I've had teachers like come down the hall and say, "What are you doing? You're having too much fun," because the kids are hooting and hollering, but guess what? They're learning like global vocab, like seriously. They're learning about mercantilism and stuff, you know, imperialism, and they don't even know that they're learning. So take advantage of those cool tools.
I'm in the process of converting my lessons to Google Classroom. So even by doing that, I'm still backwards planning. So I'm looking at the recent Regents exams. I'm looking at what they're asking. I'm looking what direction the state is going. And I'm making sure I'm going with my lessons to make sure it matches. I don't want to say teaching to the test, but certainly making sure it matches up to what the expectation is going to be, to make sure I hit. Because every year, every time a Regents exam comes out, they switch things up. So I think backwards planning is something that you should do first. And then once you get that skeleton created, then you can backfill with some things that you think will be interesting for students or things that are important. But you have to make sure, because schools are data-centric. They want those percentage of students passing the Regents, and they're very fixated on that. So we have to make sure we get that assessment taken care of. Not saying you have to plan everything just to it, but make sure that those bases are covered.
Yeah, I love everything these guys said, because I think it is setting your students up to be lifelong learners, to see that like growth mindset, that they're never done learning and growing as individuals. And I know that was something we talked a lot about in my room. We never want our thirst for knowledge to go away. You might just find a topic that is more interesting to you. I think the more creativity you can use, you know, if you're just talking and they're taking notes, like chances are they're not gonna recall a lot of that, and even if they do, it might just be for that quiz that you give. It's not necessarily teaching them skills to be successful. I used a lot of Google, looking at what other people were doing, a lot of looking at what was going on Pinterest. I subscribed to different websites to download different worksheets, the snipping tool. Anybody use the snipping tool? I made a lot of worksheets just to be at the level my kids needed with the higher content. We used Kahoot. Google Classroom is a wonderful thing too, because I could like design an entire interactive lesson, and they could all work at their own pace. I also took advantage of a lot of professional development to make my lessons more creative. I'm actually certified to do escape rooms. So like I will never forget my kids walking in one day and like overnight I had like changed it into like a zombie attack and they were like, oh my gosh, what's going on? I'm like, guys, there's been a zombie attack and you need to solve all these math problems or you're gonna be infected by zombies. And I had one kid that I knew was just gonna like eat it alive and he's like dragging around his whiteboard, like gnawing on people. And like every one of those kids had such a blast. So I think if you're not having fun, as a teacher, they're probably not having fun, which means they're not engaging in the content and that kind of old school philosophy that maybe you guys grew up on. And it is sometimes, you know, still seen and I don't think that everything should be, you know, sunshine and daisies in a classroom because they are going to get to the college level and that's not typically how it goes. So it is, you know, you do need to weave in like Regents. I'd be like, okay guys, the last 5 minutes of class, we're all going to sit and answer 3 Regents questions. So you're weaving it in throughout the different classes. You're never making one thing an entire blast, you know, never have 85 minutes of pure fun, but don't do 85 minutes of pure boring.
Thank you. All right, well, this was certainly 85 minutes of fun. Thank you, guys. Thank you, students, for coming.